William Harris rubbed his tired eyes as he studied the trade reports on his desk. The small office aboard Proxima Station felt even smaller after 14 hours of non-stop work. As Earth's lead diplomat in this sector, he had the impossible job of making humanity seem important to alien species who had been traveling between stars since humans were still figuring out how to make fire. "Ambassador Harris, would you like more coffee?" asked his assistant through the intercom. "Yes, please, Sam. Make it strong." The clock on his wall showed 22:17 station time. Most other diplomats had retired to their quarters, but Harris needed to finish reviewing these documents before tomorrow's trade meeting with the Lithurians. Earth needed those mineral rights. The screen on his wall suddenly flickered, interrupting his work. The blue and gold symbol of the Zarkathian Empire filled the display, an unscheduled broadcast overriding all station channels. Harris frowned. The Empire rarely addressed the diplomatic community directly. The symbol faded, replaced by the stern face of Supreme Commander Vexlor. His gray skin looked almost metallic under the harsh lights, 6 yellow eyes blinking in their unsettling pattern. "Attention all civilized worlds," Vexlor began, his translator giving his words a flat, emotionless quality. "Today, the Zarkathian Empire has successfully completed the pacification of the Nebulon colony in the Outer Rim. Their continued refusal to comply with imperial resource taxation necessitated decisive action." Harris sat up straighter. The Nebulons were peaceful. Their representatives had shared meals with him just last month. "All resistance has been eliminated," Vexlor continued. 50,000 Nebulon colonists have been neutralized. The system is now under direct imperial control. Harris felt his stomach drop. 50,000 beings, gone. Just like that. Imperial administrators will arrive within 3 standard cycles. All trade vessels should report to Imperial Customs before approaching the system. This action serves as a reminder that resistance to Imperial decree carries consequences. Glory to the Empire. The broadcast cut off, returning to the regular station feed. Harris sat frozen, his coffee forgotten. The intercom buzzed. "Ambassador, did you see that?" Sam's voice shook slightly. "I did," Harris replied. "Get me everything we have on the Nebulon colony, and send messages to the other human diplomats. We need an emergency meeting." Harris stood and walked to the window. From here, he could see the massive station ring, with hundreds of diplomatic vessels docked like jewels on a necklace. The Zarkathian cruiser loomed largest among them, its weapon systems giving it a menacing appearance even at rest. His personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from Ambassador Galith of the Praxi Confederation. "Most unfortunate about the Nebulons," the alien diplomat's message read. "However, one must respect the Empire's authority in that sector. These things happen, my dear Harris. I suggest we focus on tomorrow's trade discussions." Harris read the message twice, anger building inside him. He started receiving similar notes from other ambassadors, expressions of mild regret, followed by a quick change of subject. The diplomatic community was already moving on, treating 50,000 deaths as an unfortunate footnote. His door chimed, and Sam entered with the coffee. "The human delegation can meet in an hour," Sam said, setting down the mug. "Director Miller says to keep it quiet until we decide on a response." Harris nodded, already drafting a formal request in his mind. The Galactic Council rarely held emergency sessions, but there were procedures for it. Someone had to speak for those who could no longer speak for themselves. "Sam, prepare a council request form," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "And get me a secure line to Earth Command." While the galaxy's diplomats prepared to sleep, William Harris prepared for war, not with weapons, but with the only tool humans had that seemed to worry the older species: the stubborn refusal to accept injustice, even when fighting it seemed foolish. 50,000 dead, and if Harris had anything to say about it, they would not be forgotten by morning. Director Patricia Miller's hologram flickered as the connection stabilized between Proxima Station and Earth Command. Her expression was tight with concern as she looked at Harris. "Bill, "You need to think carefully about what you're doing," she said. Her voice was calm but firm. "The Zarkathian Empire controls 17 major trade routes, including 2 that Earth colonies depend on for medical supplies." Harris paced his office, unable to sit still. The emergency meeting with the other human diplomats had ended badly. Most agreed with Miller. Humanity couldn't afford to challenge the Empire. "Pat, they killed 50,000 beings and announced it like a weather report," Harris said. "And every other species is just nodding along like it's normal." Miller sighed. "Because for them, it is normal. The Empire has been the dominant power for 8 centuries. Earth has been part of the galactic community for less than 30 years. Harris stopped pacing and looked directly at Miller's hologram. "So we just accept it. Pretend we didn't notice." "I'm saying we can't afford to make powerful enemies," Miller replied. "The Zarkathians have planetary defense systems we can barely understand, let alone counter. Their warships carry weapons that could turn Earth's fleet to dust in minutes." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's air recyclers. Harris walked to his desk and pulled up images from his last meeting with the Nebulon representatives. Gentle beings with 4 arms and skin that changed color with their emotions. They had brought gifts, intricate music boxes that played songs that made human listeners feel homesick for places they'd never been. The Empire targeted them because their colony sits on top of rare mineral deposits, Harris said quietly. They refused to pay the new tax rates, so they were pacified. That's the word Vexlor used. Miller's hologram shifted as she leaned forward. "Bill, I understand how you feel. But this is politics at a scale humans are still learning to navigate. Sometimes we have to accept things we don't like to survive long enough to change them later." "And how many more massacres happen while we wait for later?" Harris asked. "The Litharians told me this morning they expect the Council to issue a standard note of regret and move on. No investigation, no consequences." Miller was quiet for a moment. "What exactly are you planning?" "I've requested an emergency council session," Harris said. "I want to present evidence of what the Empire has been doing across multiple systems. This isn't an isolated incident. The Council rarely grants emergency sessions, especially to challenge the Empire," Miller pointed out. "They've granted it," Harris replied. "The session is scheduled for 2 days from now." Miller's eyes widened slightly. "How did you manage that?" "I have friends among the smaller species who are tired of living under the Empire's boot," Harris said. "They helped push it through before the Empire's representatives could block it. The Empire won't forget this, Bill. They'll come after Earth eventually." Harris nodded. "I know. That's why I need your help. I need 48 hours to gather more evidence, testimonies from survivors. There are rumors of other massacres that weren't broadcast." Miller stared at him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed. "You have 48 hours, not a minute more. And Bill, if this goes badly, I can't protect you. Earth government will disavow your actions to preserve our standing." "I understand," Harris said, "but someone has to speak for those who can't." "Be careful," Miller said softly. "The Empire has eliminated diplomats before. They call it unfortunate accidents during travel." The hologram flickered off, leaving Harris alone with his thoughts. He pulled up his contact list and encrypted communication channel. If he was going to challenge an empire that had ruled the stars for centuries, he would need allies, and evidence that no one could ignore. Outside his window, the massive Zarkathian cruiser was preparing to depart, its engines glowing with strange energy. Harris watched it, wondering if he had just started something that would end in humanity's destruction, or its finest moment. Harris pulled his hood lower as he moved through the dimly lit lower levels of Proxima Station. This area housed maintenance systems and temporary quarters for visiting service crews, far from the polished diplomatic sectors above. Few would recognize an Earth ambassador down here, which was exactly what he needed. He checked the small device in his palm that displayed a pulsing blue dot. The meeting point was just ahead, in a forgotten storage area between recycling systems. A soft voice called from the shadows. Ambassador Harris. Harris turned to see a slender figure step forward. Her skin was pale blue with faint patterns that seemed to shift like clouds. A Nebulan. She wore simple worker clothes, but her posture revealed her true status. Lyra, Harris said quietly. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I almost didn't come, she replied, her translator giving her words a musical quality despite the grim situation. Being seen with a human diplomat could be dangerous now. Harris nodded. I understand. But what happened to your colony? Was no accident. Lyra finished. She pulled a small crystal from her pocket. This contains data from our colony's emergency systems. The Empire didn't just kill our people. They tested new weapons on them first, recorded the results. Harris took the crystal, his hand shaking slightly. This could help convince the Council. The Council. Lyra gave a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. They have ignored our petitions for years. Why would they listen now? Because I won't let them ignore this, Harris said firmly. But I need more. There are rumors of other massacres. Lyra's skin darkened, not rumors. 12 colonies in the past year alone. The Empire calls them pacifications, but they are tests, preparing for something bigger. Harris felt cold. Preparing for what? We don't know. But they target colonies with specific mineral compositions. They take readings during the attacks. A noise from nearby made them both freeze. Harris motioned Lyra toward a small alcove as a maintenance droid rolled past. I need to go, Lyra said when the droid was gone. But there are others who will help. 3 other species have lost colonies. I will connect you. Thank you, Harris said. I'll make sure your people's story is heard. Lyra's skin briefly flashed with a pattern that Harris recognized as the Nebulan gesture of respect. Be careful, Ambassador. The Empire has eyes everywhere. After she left, Harris made his way to a secure communication booth. He needed military support if things went wrong. He entered his emergency access code and waited as the system connected. Commander Alan Rodriguez appeared on the screen, his Earth Defense Fleet uniform crisp despite the late hour. Ambassador Harris, Rodriguez said with a slight nod. This is unexpected. I need your help, Commander, Harris said, explaining the situation quickly. Rodriguez listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious. When Harris finished, he was quiet for a moment. What you're asking could be viewed as a military provocation, Rodriguez finally said. I'm not asking for warships, Alan. Just information on Imperial fleet movements, and perhaps a defense vessel within jump range of the station, in case things go badly. Rodriguez sighed. The U.S. Defiant is conducting exercises near Alpha Centauri. I could redirect her to a position 1 jump from Proxima, for routine patrol purposes. Thank you, Harris said. Don't thank me yet, Rodriguez replied. If the Empire decides to make an example of you, 1 ship won't stop them. I know, but it might buy enough time for evidence to reach Earth. After ending the call, Harris spent the next 6 hours meeting with representatives from 3 other species who had suffered similar losses. Each provided data, testimony, and evidence of the Empire's systematic elimination of colonies that resisted their control. By morning station time, Harris had built both a case against the Empire and a small coalition willing to support him. As he returned to his quarters to prepare for the council meeting, he received a message from Lyra. More listening, less talking. Empire spy among council staff. Harris deleted the message and looked out at the busy station dock. The Empire's cruiser had returned during the night. They were watching. With less than a day until the council session, Harris knew the real challenge was just beginning. It wasn't enough to have evidence. He needed to survive long enough to present it. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council glowed with soft blue light. Hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy sat in rising tiers around a central speaking platform. Harris stood at the entrance, straightening his formal diplomatic uniform. His heart beat faster than normal, but his hands were steady. Ambassador Harris, a voice called. Harris turned to see Director Miller approaching. "I didn't expect you to come," Harris said. Miller gave him a tight smile. "Earth government sent me to make sure you don't start an interstellar war. But off the record, make them listen, Bill." Harris nodded and stepped into the chamber. Conversations quieted as he walked toward the platform. He could feel the stares, some curious, others hostile. The Empire's representatives sat in their privileged position near the front, Lord Drakmar's six-eyed gaze following Harris with cold intensity. The council leader, an ancient Forillian whose skin had faded to almost white with age, raised a hand for silence. "This emergency session has been called by Earth's Ambassador William Harris," the leader announced, voice amplified throughout the chamber. "The subject is the recent action at Nebulon Colony. Ambassador Harris, you may speak." Harris stepped onto the platform. The system scanned him, projecting his image to all corners of the vast room. "Members of the Council," Harris began, 3 days ago, the Zarkathian Empire announced the deaths of 50,000 beings on Nebulon Colony. They called it pacification. I call it murder." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Empire's representatives remained still. But this was not an isolated incident. Harris continued, "With the help of survivors and witnesses, I have gathered evidence of 12 similar actions in the past year alone." He activated the data crystal Lyra had given him. Above the platform, images appeared, recordings of Imperial ships firing on civilian structures, sensor readings of new weapons being deployed, lists of casualties. "The Empire claims these actions were necessary to maintain order," Harris said. "But the evidence shows something else. These aren't just examples of excessive force. They are systematic tests of new weapons technology on civilian populations." The murmurs grew louder. Harris noticed several representatives looking uncomfortable, especially those from smaller worlds who lived in fear of the Empire. "Ambassador Harris makes grave accusations without understanding galactic realities." Lord Drakmar's voice cut through the noise as he rose. "The Empire maintains peace across thousands of systems. Sometimes, regrettably, force is required." Harris kept his focus. "Force against armed rebels is one thing. Destroying entire colonies to test weapons is another. The records show the Empire specifically targeted these colonies for their unique mineral compositions and populations." He displayed more evidence, communications between Imperial commanders discussing test subjects and weapons effectiveness. A representative from the Litharian Federation stood. "These documents could be falsified. The human species is known for creative fiction. The data carries authentication markers," Harris replied. "Any member may examine them. But more importantly, I ask you all, when Supreme Commander Vexlor announced the deaths of 50,000 beings, did any of you protest? Did any of you question?" Silence fell across the chamber. "Our silence makes us complicit," Harris continued. "Today it's the Nebulons. Tomorrow it could be any of our worlds that refuse the Empire's demands." Lord Drakmar stepped forward, his ceremonial armor clicking as he moved. "The Empire has maintained galactic peace for 8 centuries. Humans have barely learned to leave their planet. You cannot comprehend the complexities of maintaining order across thousands of systems." "I comprehend the difference between order and terror," Harris replied. "I understand that peace built on fear isn't peace at all." Several representatives nodded, first hesitantly, then with growing confidence. Drakmar's eyes narrowed. "The Empire will not forget this insult, human. Your world will face consequences for your reckless accusations." The chamber erupted in voices as Drakmar and the Imperial delegation rose and walked out. Harris watched them go, aware that he had just made the most powerful enemy in the galaxy. The council leader called for order. "This session will recess for 1 hour while we examine the evidence provided by Ambassador Harris." As Harris stepped down from the platform, he saw Miller's face. She looked both proud and terrified. They both knew what would happen next. The Empire would retaliate. Harris barely slept that night. The council session had ended with a promise to investigate the evidence, But he knew the Empire's influence would slow any real action. As he dressed the next morning, his communication panel chimed urgently. "Ambassador, you need to see this." Sam's voice sounded strained. Harris activated his screen to see live feeds from across human space. Imperial warships had appeared near 3 Earth colonies overnight. They weren't attacking, just hovering in space, weapon systems glowing with potential energy. His private line beeped. "Earth Command." "Harris, what have you done?" Director Miller's face was pale with anger and fear. "The Empire has suspended all trade with human colonies. Medical shipments to New Seattle are being turned back. There are reports of Imperial cruisers near our mining operations in the Ta City system. They're trying to scare us," Harris said, though his mouth felt dry. "Well, it's working. Earth government has ordered you to issue a formal apology to the Empire. Immediately." Harris shook his head. "Pat, we can't back down now. The Council is reviewing the evidence." "The Council moves slowly. Our colonies need those medical supplies now." Miller's voice softened slightly. "Bill, I understand why you did this, but sometimes we have to accept that we can't change everything at once." Before Harris could respond, Sam burst into the office. "Ambassador, Imperial ships are jamming our transmissions. They're trying to isolate the station." Harris made his decision. "Sam, send the evidence. All of it. To every news outlet in human space and to every diplomatic mission. Use the emergency channels." "Ambassador, that's against protocol," Sam said, looking uncertain. "Do it now, before they complete the jamming." Harris turned back to Miller's image. "Pat, I can't apologize. Not when we're right." Miller's image flickered as the jamming increased. "Harris, the transmission cut off." For the next hour, Harris and Sam worked frantically to distribute the evidence while they still could. When the last package was sent, Harris contacted Commander Rodriguez on a heavily encrypted channel. "Commander, what's the status of the U.S. Defiant?" Rodriguez looked grim. "In position near Proxima, as promised. But Harris, we've got bigger problems. An Imperial battlecruiser just arrived at New Seattle Colony. They're demanding the governor publicly denounce your statements to the Council. And if they refuse, the Empire hasn't made specific threats, but their weapons are powered up." Harris felt cold fear grip him. This was exactly what Miller had warned about: innocent people suffering for his actions. "I need to send a message to New Seattle," Harris said. "You can't. Imperial jammers are blocking all diplomatic channels." Harris slammed his fist on the desk. "They're trying to isolate us. Force Earth to disavow me." "It's working," Rodriguez said quietly. "Earth Command is considering it." Harris was quiet for a moment. "Then, deploy the fleet, Commander." Rodriguez stared at him. "I don't have that authority. And neither do you. Not the whole fleet. Just make the Imperial ships think we're not as weak as they believe. Position defensive formations near our colonies. Don't fire unless fired upon." "That's a risky move, Ambassador. The Empire respects strength, not submission. If we back down now, they'll know they can threaten us any time they want something." Rodriguez was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll do what I can. But Harris, if this goes wrong, we're looking at the first interstellar war involving Earth." After the call ended, Harris walked to his window. In the distance, he could see the Imperial cruiser that had been watching the station. Its engines were powering up. His communication panel chimed again. An anonymous text message appeared. "Imperial Science Division knows you have the evidence. Emperor Zarkath has ordered your capture, not your death. They need something from humans. Meet me at Docking Bay 12 in 1 hour. Come alone. CL." Harris read the message twice. It could be a trap. But if the Empire needed something from humans, that might explain why they hadn't simply destroyed Earth's colonies already. 1 hour to decide if he should trust this mysterious CL or stay and face the Empire's wrath. Docking Bay 12 was nearly empty when Harris arrived. He had told no one where he was going, not even Sam. If this was a trap, at least no one else would be caught in it. The bay was used for small maintenance vessels, with poor lighting and little security monitoring. Perfect for a secret meeting or an ambush. Ambassador Harris. Harris turned quickly. A human woman stepped from behind a stack of cargo containers. She wore the gray uniform of the Imperial Science Division, with its distinctive purple trim. Her blonde hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes constantly scanned the area. "I'm Catherine Lewis," she said quietly. "We don't have much time." "You work for the Empire?" Harris asked, keeping his distance. 5 years now. Earth government placed several scientists in exchange programs with the Imperial research teams. Most of us report back on their technological advances. "You're a spy." Lewis smiled thinly. "I prefer scientific observer. But yes. Why risk contacting me?" Lewis glanced around nervously. "Because what the Empire is doing goes beyond normal political maneuvering. The massacres you exposed are just the beginning." She pulled out a small device and activated it. A hologram appeared showing a strange mineral formation. "This is stellarite. It's extremely rare and has unique properties when exposed to certain energy fields. The Empire has been searching for large deposits for decades." Harris studied the image. "What does this have to do with the massacres?" "The colonies that were destroyed all had small stellarite deposits. The Empire was testing weapons designed to extract it efficiently without damaging its properties. They killed 50,000 beings to test mining equipment." Harris felt sick. Lewis shook her head. "Not mining equipment. Weapons. Stellarite can amplify energy weapons beyond anything currently existing. A ship equipped with stellarite-enhanced weapons could destroy an entire planet from orbit." Harris felt cold. "And they found deposits?" "Yes, but here's what they don't want anyone to know. The largest deposit of stellarite in the galaxy is in human-controlled space. The New Seattle colony sits on top of it. That's why they positioned ships there," Harris whispered. "Not just to pressure Earth, but because they want the stellarite." Lewis nodded. The Empire could have crushed human resistance years ago, but they discovered the stellarite readings shortly after first contact. They'd been waiting for the right moment to take control of it. "Why are you telling me this? You're risking your life." Lewis looked away. "I joined the Imperial Science Division to learn. But I never signed up to help them destroy entire populations. What they did to the Nebulans." She stopped, composing herself. "Emperor Zarkath plans to make an example of New Seattle next. He wants the stellarite and wants to show the galaxy what happens to those who challenge Imperial authority." Harris's mind raced. "I need to warn Earth Command." "It's too late for warnings," Lewis said. "The Imperial fleet is already mobilizing." "But there's something else." She lowered her voice. "The Emperor wants to meet with you." "Meet? Why would he want to meet when he could just have me killed?" "Because your actions in the Council have caused problems. Several worlds are questioning Imperial authority now. The Emperor thinks eliminating you would only make you a martyr. Instead, he wants you to publicly withdraw your accusations." "I'll never do that." Lewis smiled for the first time. "I know, but the invitation gives you direct access to Emperor Zarkath, something no human has ever had before." Harris understood. "A chance to negotiate." "Exactly. The Empire needs that stellarite, but they don't want a prolonged conflict that might unite other species against them. You have leverage, Ambassador." A noise from the entrance made them both tense. Lewis quickly deactivated the hologram. "My shuttle leaves in 20 minutes, she whispered. "The Emperor's flagship arrives tomorrow. You'll receive a formal invitation. Be careful what you say. The Empire records everything." As she turned to leave, Harris caught her arm. "Why risk helping humans? Your career, your life." Lewis looked him directly in the eyes. "Because 50,000 deaths shouldn't be just a statistic. Even in a galaxy this big, it should matter. After she was gone, Harris stood alone in the empty bay, the weight of what he'd learned pressing down on him. Tomorrow, he would meet the being responsible for countless deaths, and somehow, he had to find a way to stop the next massacre before it began. The Imperial flagship Eternal Glory was larger than any ship Harris had ever seen. As his shuttle approached, he felt like an ant next to a mountain. Guards in ceremonial armor escorted him through corridors lined with displays of conquered worlds. The message was clear: resistance against the Empire always failed. Emperor Zarkath waited in a massive chamber with viewing windows that showed the stars. He was taller than other Zarkathians, his 6 eyes set in a face marked with ceremonial scars. His voice was surprisingly soft when he spoke. Ambassador Harris, the human who dares challenge an empire that ruled the stars before your species discovered electricity. Harris bowed slightly, enough to show respect, not enough to show submission. Emperor Zarkath, thank you for this opportunity to speak directly. An opportunity few receive, the Emperor said, gesturing toward a table where data displays glowed. Your actions in the Council were unexpected. Most species understand their place in the galactic order. Humans have a history of questioning orders we find unjust, Harris replied. The Emperor studied him. So I have observed. A fascinating trait. Inefficient, but fascinating. He waved a hand, and the displays showed New Seattle Colony. Imperial ships surrounded it. Your colony sits on resources my empire requires, Zarkath said. Traditionally, we would simply take what we need, but humans have proven difficult. You distribute information. You form alliances with unlikely partners. You refuse to accept the natural hierarchy of power. We call it standing up for what's right. You call it that. I call it an interesting tactical approach. The Emperor's eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of amusement. Your species lacks power, yet acts as though you possess it. And strangely, this causes others to treat you as though you do. Harris remained silent, letting the Emperor speak. Lewis had warned him that Zarkath enjoyed philosophical discussions before making threats. I could destroy your colonies, the Emperor continued. My weapons would turn New Seattle to ash in minutes. Yet here you stand, seemingly unafraid. I'm terrified, Harris admitted, but fear doesn't change what's right. The Emperor made a sound that might have been a laugh. Your honesty is refreshing. Most diplomats would never admit fear. He studied the displays again. The stellarite beneath New Seattle is the largest deposit we have discovered. With it, my empire could become truly invincible. And yet you haven't simply taken it, Harris said, because you know that even if you destroyed our colonies, humans would continue fighting. Other species might join them. The cost would be high, even for the empire. Very perceptive. The Emperor turned to face Harris directly. So we find ourselves at an impasse. I require the stellarite. You require your colony to continue existing. Harris took a deep breath. There's another option. A partnership. Shared mining rights, with oversight to ensure extraction doesn't harm the colony. Earth gets protection. The Empire gets stellarite. An interesting proposal. But why would I agree when I could simply take what I want? Because the evidence of the massacres has already spread across the galaxy. The Council is under pressure to act. For the first time in centuries, your empire faces real opposition. Not military, but diplomatic. More colonies questioning your authority, demanding protection. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. And if I agree to this partnership, I will help establish an oversight committee with representatives from multiple species. No more massacres, no more weapons tests on civilian populations. Bold demands from a species with little power. Sometimes power comes from being willing to stand up when others stay silent. 3 days later, the Galactic Council chamber was filled beyond capacity. Emperor Zarkath himself addressed the assembly. The first time in 2 centuries that an emperor had appeared before the council. As he announced reforms to imperial expansion policies, and a new partnership with Earth for stellarate mining. Harris watched the faces of the other diplomats. Shock, disbelief, and for some of the smaller species, hope. The agreement wasn't perfect. The Empire would remain powerful. But for the first time, there would be oversight, accountability, and consequences for actions like the Nebulon massacre. Later, as Harris prepared to return to Earth, Director Miller found him packing. "Earth Command is calling you a hero," she said. "They're saying your actions prevented a war." Harris shook his head. "I just refused to stay silent when it would have been easier to look away." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Miller replied. "One voice speaking when everyone else stays quiet." As Harris looked out at the stars, he thought about the 50,000 Nebulons whose deaths had started this journey. Their voices had been silenced, but they had not been forgotten. And because of them, perhaps millions of others would now live in a slightly more just galaxy. Not a perfect ending, but a beginning of something better.